Hello, everyone. Welcome to Season Y, Episode 1 of Zebra Reads. So this is our first Y book that we're going to look at today. And what we're looking at is the book Shelter by Jung Yun. And that could be Yoon. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. So this is the book. I don't have it for some reason, and this is the author, a picture of the book and the author, and I think it's actually that way. I don't know, somewhere. So hopefully you can see that. We will get into talking about the author. So she is a contemporary stop sharing. She is a contemporary author. She was born in Seoul, South Korea. There is not a lot of information about her on the internet. She has a website. It's fairly bare bones. All of her biographies basically say the same thing. So there wasn't a lot out there on her. Um, it appears she moved to the US when she was fairly young, and she grew up in North Dakota. Most of her adult years, it seems she's focused herself more in the US Northeast. So she attended college at Vassar. She went to the University of Pennsylvania. She went to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And currently she's an English professor at the George Washington University, which is a private university in Washington, D.C. So Shelter, which is the book that I am going to look at, it's a drama, was her first book. She published that in 2016. And then she recently followed up with a second book called Oh Beautiful, which was published in 2021. And both books seem to have fairly good reviews, and people seem to like them. I honestly completely forgot I had read this book. So I had a fun time rereading my review when I went to record this, and remembering what the book was about, and that I really enjoyed it, actually. So an overview of the book itself. This is about a Korean man, Kyung, and I may have pronounced that wrong. Again, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of my names. Kyung, and he has a not Korean wife, Jillian, and they are in the midst of financial ruin. And in the middle of that, they're upside down on their house and all of these things. So in the middle of that, tragedy strikes the family, and in its wake is this path of destruction that Kyung and Jillian have to try to navigate together. Kyung tries very hard to break the cycles of abuse and lies that he grew up with in his childhood. But in doing so, he really only exacerbates the problems. He makes one really bad choice after another, and finally the cycle sort of breaks, but not at all in a predictable way. And he basically has to lose everything along the way to get there. So that's sort of the overview of the whole book. My take on it is, this is another book that I never would have read if just left to my own devices. I like books that take place in 1800s London. I like mysteries. Modern day dramas are not top of my list, right? So I don't tend to read these kinds of books. But I finished this book very, very quickly. It literally only took me a couple of hours to read it. Now, I was sitting in a hospital room having a blood patch done, so it had my undivided attention. But I really enjoyed it. I found it to be extremely compelling and interesting. Um, the story got started really quickly, and once it started, it just moved. It went. There was no downtime, and new information came out throughout the whole book, right? There were more lies that you didn't know about. There were more stories to tell, and they come out throughout the whole thing. It's not just like up front you get all the information and then there's a resolution. It just keeps going. Every time that Kyung had an opportunity to redeem himself, he found a way to screw it up. And honestly, those sorts of things, these, adventures and folly kind of annoy and frustrate me. And they also embarrass me because I'm highly empathetic. And so I don't tend to like it when somebody just screws up time and time and time again and never can get it right. But this book, the pace was quick and the story was interesting. And so it didn't bother me like it often does in this book. Who might want to read it? If you're in the US and you're not from, a hard driving Asian Eastern culture, and you want a glimpse into how those sorts of norms are passed down in generations, then the cultural implications of this book would be really interesting. If you're not familiar with it, I found that very interesting to read. The interplay between the American and Korean culture clash did also provide interesting contrasts. I was really intrigued by the various representations of marriage and relationships that the author described. So there was quite a lot of sort of learning for me from this book about just different things I hadn't really thought about. Um, Most of the relationships are not good relationships. They are sort of benign or outright hostile. But it was an interesting look at different ways that people interact with their significant others and their children and their parents. Um, who might want to avoid it? Um, there's a lot of content warnings here. There's graphic rape, there's suicide, there's child and spousal abuse. It's both emotional and physical. If you are Korean and you can't easily extract your own culture from itself, then, this might be frustrating. This is not a positive picture of Korean culture. um, I mean, it's also not a positive picture painted of the American culture either, but it isn't. It doesn't look positively on either types of culture. There is infidelity. It has a huge impact on the story, but reading about it really wasn't terribly explicit or anything. There's not a great ending. I thought it was a satisfying ending. It's not happy per se. I thought it ended where it should have ended, which is good. So I think a lot of books don't end where they should end. So if you really need a book right now that has a good happy ending, I probably wouldn't pick it up. It's a very real ending to me, and I think doing more would have just been superfluous. So it might not be happy, but it seemed real to me. So there's a lot going on in this book that you may just want to avoid it. Bottom line on this, maybe cycles don't break because we spend too much too much of our time trying to make sure we break them. And maybe when we stop doing that, we get back to where we need to go. So again, I enjoyed this book. I will have the information on how you can buy it or get it if you would like to. Of course, check it out from the library if you can. And otherwise, I will see you next week for Season Y, Episode 2.